Okay, great. Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah, good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining. So this is the agenda for the meeting today. So I'll talk about the data request brand of variables and MIP table. Then Laurent will talk about control vocabularies. Charlotte will describe the model registration and grid registration. We'll hear an ESGF update from Forrest, and then Mario will talk about energy consumption and carbon footprint. And then we intend to allow plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And I'll just mention, there's a link here at the bottom right to the CMIP7 guidance pages, and many links throughout these slides. Of course, as Eleanor mentioned, the slides are accessible to everyone. The link has been placed in the chat. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the data request, branded variables, and the MIP tables, also known as CMOR tables. I will explain what these things are used for, what they mean. So next slide, please. So the data request, as probably everyone knows, specifies model output variables to be saved from each CMIP7 experiment. There's a link here to the latest version of the data request. There's a fair bit of documentation about the data request already online, which has been developed in a process over the past couple years, roughly. And there are links in the CMIP7 guidance pages that I just referred to. One of the basic main things you should know about the data request is that it's organized into opportunities, each of which expresses a scientific requirement. So these opportunities have been developed as part of a wide community consultation, resulting in 5 thematic papers that are in the GMD CMIP7 special issue. Each opportunity, think of it almost like a mini data request on its own. It specifies a scientific topic, justification of resources, and the expected impacts. It specifies experiments from which output is requested, and it specifies the variables that are requested from those experiments. Now, there's one very key opportunity, which is in some sense simpler than the others because it is requested uniformly from all experiments. This is called the baseline climate variables for Earth system modeling. The paper reference there describes how that list was compiled. It's 131 variables that are requested from all experiments by all modeling groups to have this set of variables consistently available for all models across the ESGF archive. You access the data request well, there's more than one way to access the data request. So the link, the first link there, the Airtable browser view, that's an online cloud database platform where you can browse through the data request, find out all sorts of information about it, including the opportunity descriptions that I just mentioned. There's also a Python package that allows you to interact with the data request programmatically. So next slide, please. And it's worth just mentioning that a change from CMIP6 is this overall new structure of the data request. I won't spend much time on this, but just to say, you can think of the data request as being layered in these 3 parts: core, the 131 variables I just mentioned; the harmonized request, which is the rest of the opportunities essentially. And these 2 parts are focused on assessment fast track timelines. There's also envisaged an unharmonized component of the data request that offers community MIPS not tied to assessment fast track timelines to provide data requests with high flexibility. This part is not yet developed, but I just want to signpost that this is planned. But the focus of this meeting is on what modeling groups need for the assessment fast track simulations. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so an important detail about the data request and CMORization process is that there's a new naming system for variables in CMIP7 referred to as branded variables. This has been created to address some of the issues that have arisen over past CMIP phases with the earlier naming system and the size of the data request. So there is more documentation of this on the guidance pages, but briefly to say, a familiar variable like AMON TAS, so monthly mean near surface air temperature, global, which in CMIP6 was in the AMON table, atmosphere monthly table. This in CMIP7 now has a new name, which is composed of the same short variable label, TAS, but then an additional label called the branded label that describes the spatial and temporal sampling of the variable. It does not describe the frequency or region. Those are additional pieces of information that are specified from the data request. So variables that differ only in their frequency or region have the same branded name. So this label, if I had to give a very brief summary of what it means, I would say, well, it's longer, but it's perhaps more informative because it describes various facets of the variable. It's composed of 4 parts, a temporal one, in this case, specifying time averaging. The next one is a vertical label, specifying here 2 meters. Then a horizontal label, which in this case says it's a lat-long field. And then the final one is an area label. In this case, the variable is unmasked, but if it were, say, over sea ice, for example, then that label would indicate that. The data request has a compound name, which combines all the facets of a variable to give it a unique name for purpose of identifying it in the data request. So lists of variables that are requested for experiments that the data request provides use this name. But alternately, the CMIP6, the old legacy CMIP6 names can be used. The data request provides those too to ease the transition to the new naming scheme, because of course we recognize that the community at this point is more familiar with the CMIP6 era names. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, thanks. So MIP tables, also known as CMOR tables, have been generated from the latest version of the data request, and their first release is available at this link that's at top left here. So to correctly produce CMIP7 output, please use CMOR version 3.13 at a minimum, which is the latest CMOR release. The tables are organized by realm, so this is a change from CMIP6. There were previously quite a few table names with names like Oman, Amon, but quite a few more than just those two. Now we have organized the tables by realm. So there's an Atmos table, an ocean table, and so forth. So there are far fewer tables and they're indexed by branded name. So what this means is that CMOR tables don't include the frequency and region. That additional information that's required to uniquely specify a variable has to be provided from the data request. So you can think of the CMOR tables as defining the characteristics of branded variables, and then the data request tells you additionally at what frequency and region are those variables requested. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is, just before we go on to CVs, this is one piece of something that's new, an additional thing that's new in CMIP7, data repacking. So following a proposal that David made to the WIP, we are going to be requiring published netcdf files to be chunked to optimize their read performance. This involves rechunking the time variables and the data variable in the time dimension. And the reason to do this is because it can greatly speed up remote access of data. And so it can also speed it up just for local downloaded files, but particularly for remote access. It could be, it's believed that not rechunking them could be a deal breaker for remote access to CMIP7 data sets. And there's a tool available for modeling centers to do this. The WIP's recommendation, well, what we are requiring is that modeling centers do this themselves because we consider it unpalatable for ESGF nodes to do this because it would change the checksum of the data. We understand the modelers don't want other people to change the checksum of their data. So this tool is available for the repacking. So further information will be provided on this shortly. This is a very new development. Of course, if any modeling centers have concerns about this, please tell us, because this is a new thing. Okay, so thank you, and I'll pass off to Laurent, who will talk about the CVs.
Good morning. I don't know if you hear me or not, but I will talk about the CVs and the change from CMIP6 to CMIP7 from the CV perspective. Next slide, please. So if you use CMOR, you should not need to interact with the CVs directly, because the CMOR table that James talked about will be using this to build the MIP table. So you will use the data request and the MIP table. You will do model and grid registration, as Charlotte, I think, will discuss next. And beyond this, your need to engage with the detail of the CVs should be very small, I think. If you are IPSL or CNRM, you have a special link to the CVs and especially MIP, so you probably know what is going on. And if you are a modeling center that is neither of those previous two categories, please raise an issue on the CMIP7 CVs GitHub repository so we can help you with your use case for the CV. Next slide, please. So to register and add content to the CV, this is how it will be managed. This is mostly managed via the EMD, the Essential Model Documentation registration process. So the idea is to go on the GitHub, and there are issues that works as form that you can fill with the information you need for the CV, which then allow pull requests to be auto-generated and review, update, approve, and merge. And that way the CV will be up to date quite quickly with this. There are also, for the non-model stuff, the issues for the non-model stuff, like experimental registration. If you know people who want this, point them as well on the CMIP7 CVs on GitHub to be able to feel an issue with this. And if you are stuck or you want answer on something, please raise a blank issue so we can help you. So yeah, this point is the IPSL and CNRM, UK ESM and CAN ESM are guinea pig beta testers for this process. So they will help us to point out the hard point of this process. So I think you could thank them later. Next slide, please. So the main, I will talk about the notable changes from CMIP6 in CMIP7. So basically, one thing is that we will do quality assurance and quality checks, QA/QC, and we will do it on all data sets. So for now, it's really basic stuff. Are there any typo on the source ID or typo on the variable name? And so on, pretty much on all the global attributes. If you do not meet those basic tests, your data will not be published. ESGF will check those before publishing. So this is quite an important information right here. Next slide, please. Other changes in the DRS, the data reference syntax. So the file name and the directory. Here is a slide for the file name. The next one is for directory. You've got the template that was used for CMIP6 and the new template for CMIP7. And basically the 4 points are the detail of what we change. So we get rid of the table ID. We use a region and frequency. We split the information encoded in the table ID into the region and frequency. The grid label is just moved in another place in the template. And we mainly added the branded suffix that James talked about just before. And we renamed the member ID into variant label just for clarity. Next slide, please, to see the directory. So the same thing, you can see the template that was used in CMIP6, and in CMIP7 we made the same change from the file name. And one more, we added a DRS specs at the start of the template. You can see DRS underscore specs. This is a new facet that will allow tools to know what is behind in the DRS. So basically, it tells us which DRS the tool have to use to interpret the directory's string. And the other thing is the same as the file name. We renamed the member ID into variant label, get rid of the table ID. We added the branded suffix, and we renamed the version into directory date, just for clarity as well. But for as previously for the file name, you should not need to think about these changes for the most part, because all the tools we use will handle them for you. Next slide, please. So there are some changes in the required global attributes. So in the global attribute in NetZDF, there will be the branded related attribute. So the variable name, area label, temporal label. They are not sorted here, but it's the branded stuff that James talked about earlier. We added the direct specs, the region. We changed the license that was a long string that was difficult to validate into just the ID of the license to allow for easier verification and identification of the license. We'll clarify the meaning of the data specs version. And we also change this one is we made the following optional as they are not validated. So I will take the experiment as example. In CMIP6, in the global attribute in CMIP6, there was experiment ID and experiment. The experiment key, the value was basically the description of the experiment. And we found out that there was some typos in it, and so it was impossible to validate correctly through all the dataset that was published in CMIP6. So listen learn, we made it optional, so there will not be validated. And so it is the same for some of the global attributes, the grid, institution, license, source type, and such. And another change was we dropped any concept of the sub-experiment that is now capture the information of the sub-experiment that was used in the decadal prediction is now encoded in the initialization index of the variant label. So we got the information in the DRS, but they are not this facet anymore. And we get rid of table ID and sub-experiment ID as well. Next slide, please. Other things you may have heard of if you look into the CV subject. ESGVOC, here you got the link here on GitHub, is a library that will ease the interaction with the CV. Basically, it allows us to query all the CVs in all the repository that define CVs for all project and such. So it will ease the management of the CV. It is intended to be a community tool, so feel free to raise issue, comment, or anything on GitHub. Branded variable was already discussed by James. The variable registry, we're still planning on doing this, but it is now on hold. Basically, it will be a repository that will list all the possible variable, the branded variable and the description of those in the same place. Data specs, this will be a unique version number that identifies the collection of metadata values that are allowed, known, and such. We do not know exactly how this will be managed yet. Detail will come soon, but in the end, it will be a single version string with some numbers, and we don't know yet how to increment those and etc. It will come soon. Next slide, but I think I will let Charlotte talk about the EMD.
Thank you very much. So I'm Charlotte Pascoe from CEDA, and this next bit is about the model documentation. Next slide, please. So CMIP7 is taking a different approach to model documentation compared with CMIP6. The aim is to make it easier to create model documentation and for the model documentation to be more useful. Essentially what that means is there's a very much simplified structure to how we capture information about your models. You'll tell us just about the overall model and then some information about each of the main components of your model as defined in the controlled vocabularies. It's the kind of level of detail that you would write about your models when you describe them in academic literature. And it's going to be more useful because the coverage will be complete. Next slide, please. Okay, so the model documentation will follow this new essential model documentation standard. More about that on this link to an article published on Zenodo. And that tells you very much the description of the sorts of information that we'll be looking for with the examples of what that content might look like. Providing model documentation is going to be mandatory for CMIP7, and it'll be part of the registration process when you register your model. So just as no quality control passing means no publication, so no essential model documentation means no participation in CMIP7. But on the plus side, it will be much easier and quicker to create that documentation. So each model component only requires an overview description, and each of the components has the same structure. So there's going to be no surprises in the information that you're being asked for. And we'll be asking you to describe the model on the native grid. That's the grid that did the integration. The key benefit, well, one is complete coverage. So it's going to be 100% guaranteed that you're going to be able to find information about the models that have submitted data to CMIP7. And that's going to make this documentation a reliable entry point so that all users of CMIP7 outputs, be they analysts or downscalers, or maybe they're an archive service or a climate service, they'll all be able to access and know that they can access this documentation. Next slide, please. So, as Laurence said, the essential model documentation will be entered as part of the same GitHub form that's going to be used for model registration. And then once that's entered, there'll be a GitHub issue review phase in which your model documentation will be checked. And that's going to be checked by a person as opposed to some code. And that checking is things like consistency of references, maybe checking to see that the words make sense, but we'll leave the content up to you. After that review, and once those changes that might appear through that review process, once that's complete, the essential model documentation is going to be stored in JSON files on GitHub. And then the documentation can be edited via the usual GitHub issue pull request mechanisms. Next slide, please. Okay, this is about grids. So the grid part will have some structure to it, and we'll go on to talk about that next. Next slide, please. So when you're registering to archive grids, all the data sets in CMIP7 will have a grid label in their file name. And that will uniquely identify the horizontal grid, the data set used across, and that horizontal grid reference will be available for all models. I should say that the name of the grid doesn't really have any significance. Just like the ensemble identifiers, they're just an index, but they mean something, but the index doesn't tell you what it means. So the grid label is an index, and you will look up to find out what that grid definition is. And that's going to be able to be stored in GitHub, where you'll be able to find out what your grid reference, for instance, G53 means. Okay, this is different to CMIP6, which just had a statement about whether or not the grid was native or some other description whereby it described if any regridding had happened. This is some useful information about the native grid of the model. So these grids must be registered before you publish your data, but you don't necessarily have to provide all of this grid information at the time of the model registration. The essential model documentation native grids will already be given a grid label. So if there's a non-native grids are needed for your output, then these can be described via a GitHub form. Next slide, please. Okay, the ESGF updates. I think that's Forrest who's up next.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. We'll go ahead and start on the next slide. Yeah, so the Earth System Grid Federation has been working as a team across countries to build out a new next generation architecture. So you may hear it called ESGF-NG. That includes a variety of things on the front end and on the back end, and I'll just go through a quick list here to give you an idea of what some of these things are. So we're transitioning from what has been a distributed peer-to-peer set of index servers to two cloud-based, globally synchronized data catalogs that represent all of the available data from CMIP, anything that is an ESGF. And those catalogs will be stacked, so they'll be based on the spatiotemporal asset catalog specification. The West catalog will be hosted in the US by the US Department of Energy. The East catalog will be hosted in the UK and supported by CETA. And so they'll be kept synchronized with a message queue based on Kafka. And what this means is that data centers will publish to either the Western catalog or the Eastern catalog. And when those data are incorporated into the catalog, then messages will be sent on this message queue to identify that there are new data, and then those records will be replicated into the other catalog so that they can be kept in sync. And this is a process that will take a matter of seconds to perform. Many of you are probably familiar with the MetaGrid web-based user interface. So we're updating MetaGrid to now access these stack catalogs. And Intake ESGF, you may be less familiar with. This is a new Python interface that you can use to search and retrieve data automatically from these new stack catalogs. Fortunately, it also works with the traditional solar index and some of the intermediate technologies that we've deployed in between. So it's a very nice framework for looking across generations of the technology to find the files you're looking for. Downloads will be available from HTTPS. For all data nodes, and then for some data nodes, we'll be supporting Globus transfers. And so these are unattended data transfers that happen in parallel so that they can rapidly move lots of data. So if you have bulk transfers of data that you would like to perform, you can use Globus. ESG pull. This is a command line tool for both searching and doing bulk data transfers. Very similar to a tool that you may have used before called Cinda. Some new data nodes are going to also offer ZAR type aggregation, probably via Kerchunk or virtual ZAR. And so that will allow you to stream data across multiple data files within a data set to do your analysis without having to actually transfer or download a whole bunch of NetCDF files. Next slide. On the publishing side, the publisher is going to use ESGVolc, which was just talked about, and support QA/QC capabilities, which have also been mentioned here, and support the new DRS. Data producers will publish to either, as I mentioned before, the Western catalog or the East catalog, but not both. We are supporting new capabilities for identity and access management. So all the data is open, but we'll allow authentication and authorization and require it for publishing data. Also, if you want to do some transfers with, for instance, Globus, then you'll need to authenticate to some institution out there that's supported. So Globus Auth is what we're going to use in the US. EGI check-in will be used in the UK and the EU. But basically, these do the same thing. They allow you to authenticate against your institutional credentials, wherever that institution may be, and the institutions that are supported in these two mechanisms overlap by something like 90%. So they're just basically doing the same thing with just two different implementations. Some sites are also going to offer server-side computing through WPS or Globus Compute. This allows you within your interactive analysis environment to kick off jobs that run remotely on the server side to do some kind of data summarization. For instance, if you have a bunch of monthly files that you see out there and you don't want to download them, you just want annual averages or something, we'll have some functionality that will compute those for you and then provide the data that you've requested back. So these very simple kinds of operations that would otherwise require you to download the data and do the computation yourself, we'll try to support. Some sites are also going to offer user computing, so the ability to use a Jupyter Hub environment to do what we call data proximate computing, which is to log into this environment and then be able to just see all of the data appearing as if it appears locally, so that you don't have to download it or identify it ahead of time. Next slide. Yeah, so this is a very complex slide that tries to encapsulate all of those changes. On the left-hand side, you'll see identity and access management, which I already talked about, supporting Globus Auth and EGI check-in. Users are kind of at the top, the data analysts and modelers and stakeholders. So they'll be using interfaces like Metagrid or Intake ESGF or ESG Pool to access the data. Or on the right-hand side, we were showing you can get data access by transferring data or streaming data for those that support ZAR or data aggregation. They'll also have direct data access through user computing. So some of these Tier 1 nodes will support that capability. The West and East catalog are identified in sort of the middle strip on this slide. And you'll see that they're kept in sync through this message queue in the next line below, where the publisher will be writing out messages to update the catalogs. This message queue is really nice functionality for keeping these catalogs in sync with each other, but also give us the opportunity to initiate other kinds of services that may need to be triggered when data are published or retracted. We also want to offer this as a capability to the community in case they want to do their own kinds of community data management, data access projects. This will be a creative way of bringing in more innovation through other projects. One of the things that we plan to have as a consumer of this queue, besides keeping the catalogs in sync, is this rapid evaluation framework, which is a set of tools to analyze the data and do some evaluation of the model output. And we are intending to hook that up to this message queue so that when new data of the sort that needs to be analyzed arrives, it can automatically be replicated and rerun through this rapid evaluation framework. Down at the bottom are examples of configurations of tier 1 nodes and tier 2 nodes. So nodes within the Earth System Grid Federation may only host their own local data, or they may host a large amount of replicated data as well. And that's totally up to them how they want to do it. They may provide server-side computing, they may provide user computing, but all of those are optional and haven't really evolved to the point where they can be standardized across environments yet. But we hope in the future that that will become more of a standard thing for ESGF. Okay, I think that's the last slide. Okay, next up.
So I believe Mario,
Yeah.
Is your mic okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Can you listen to me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I will explain. Actually, I think the first thing with this thing about the activities that we are pushing for the energy consumption and the carbon footprint. So please, next slide. Yeah. So our main motivation, and actually something that what we consider really important for these activities, is try to quantify the emission related to the computing of the simulation that we are going to run for all these CMIP7 exercises. To make this possible, the idea is to collect some metrics, some basic computational performance information for all these Earth system model and HPC platform where we are going to run our simulation for CMIP7. The idea behind this computational performance metrics is for all this execution, the configuration, the experiment, try to identify some model bottlenecks and also rank this specified for climate codings. With all this information also, we will try to understand the energy consumption behind all this activity that we are doing and the relation with the emission behind this. We prepare a guidance. From this document, you will see that the idea is try to ensure that all these model sites provide general model information and also information about the platform, so about the HPC. And also in this guidance is explained in detail the specific metrics to provide. The idea is to have all these metrics per experiment or configuration. Well, obviously to try to understand both, the energy plus emissions, and then also this computational performance behind the execution. We understand that this collection actually is going to be the first time for the exercise, at least at this level. We understand the complexity behind this, in some cases. So what we have done is try to split all these metrics in 3 different levels. The first levels, so also is related with the complexity, but also to ensure that the first level could cover the main basic stuff that we need for this first point, these 2 objectives that I explained before. Next slide, please. Yeah. So to proceed with this and ensure that we are covering these 2 objectives, each modeling center will receive a private spreadsheet. Also try to ensure that we are covering all the data privacy. And in this specific spreadsheet, following also the instruction that you will find in the guidance, the idea is try to provide all this information, these metrics about the experiment and model configuration. And then also we would like to split the collection of this experiment in 3 different: production, tuning, and discarded. So obviously production, I think, is the one that probably you were thinking at the beginning, but also we consider really important to quantify all these metrics that are coming from all the exercise doing before with the tuning and all the experiment also that are going to be discarded. As I was commenting before, these 3 levels, according also to the complexity, is also to ensure that we have all the information needed to fulfill these 2 objectives. So tier 1 is going to be mandatory for all the modeling center. So this means that we're expecting all this information for sure. Then tier 2 is encouraged. Technically also is easy to get, so maybe not totally needed for the final analysis, but obviously really important. Also the complexity is not too much. And then tier 3 is going to be optional. So in this case, there are some specific metrics that maybe could extend more time for the collection or the calculation, but also will be useful for the final analysis. As I said before, it's not only to provide this spreadsheet. So the idea, we have a guidelines that is already available. And also we would like to provide direct support from our task team during all the CMIP7 exercise. So actually we provide not only one deadline, I will say later, no, but actually different deadlines to ensure that this is happening. And then also we will have this shared fact with some question and answer. So the idea, at the moment that we are receiving some question, we are going to provide this support for the different modeling center, and we will provide all this information in this fact. So probably other modeling center could have the same question, and we will try to answer all of them. Next slide, please. Yeah. So obviously the objective behind this is try to provide more insight about the activities that we are doing in CMIP7. And with this, we will publish a peer review publication. Actually, we did it with a smaller exercise for CMIP6, and there is a publication. The idea now is try to ensure that most of the modeling center doing CMIP7 are going to be involved on this, and from then try to provide this aggregated and per group analysis. Here we are scoping computational performance with this scalability bottlenecks and some comparison. And obviously also this overview about the energy consumption, carbon footprint, and other ideas that could come from the analysis. Well, if it is possible, then also we would like to share in a maybe more visual or useful way for all these results. So also we were thinking in a dashboard, as for example is done for ESGF data statistic, and probably we will happy also to try to implement this with all the results that we could collect from this exercise. And I think that's all. No, there's no more slide, no? So thank you. Okay, yeah, no, there is more. Yeah, so all this is going to be all this information is going to be, well, this is more general, no, but it's going to be in the CMIP7 guidance, and also we'll find more information for the modelers, especially there.
Thank you, Mario. I think we're now just moving on to questions and answers. So thank you very much to all our presenters. If you have a question, please raise your hand or write it in the chat. There's a GitHub discussion board where you can also add questions that will be answered by the WIP and relevant task teams over the next few months, days and months. But please do ask any questions you have now. Any questions? You've all been very clear, obviously.
Maybe just I can add for the people that, as I said before, we will have different deadlines. So the most important is that all the model center provide information. If for the first deadline, maybe try to align with the fast track is not possible yet, we will continue working on it and ensure that all the people provide the metrics sooner or later.
Thank you, Mario. Doesn't look like we have any questions. James, is there anything you wanted to add?
I don't believe so. Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks everyone for attending. And just to remind you, of course, the slides will be available. Maybe I'll just throw in a couple points for emphasis. As I mentioned earlier, the repacking thing is new. Like this is a new requirement we're asking modeling groups to do. So if you do have feedback about that, please, it is very welcome. I guess one other thing, I mentioned the CMOR tables, the change in their structure, and Laurent mentioned how, as far as we know, IPSL, CNRM are not using CMOR. Many other groups are, but as he emphasized, if you're not in one of those two categories and there are issues with the tooling, with the resources we're providing, please, we do want to know about that so we can help you with your use case. A question about ESGF-NG. I think, Forrest, are you okay to take that? In the chat there about when
Sure.
we'll... Yes.
Sure. I can just say that we're working hard on getting that architecture ready. We're hoping to actually migrate and republish the CMIP6 data and CMIP6 Plus data into the NG architecture during this month of November. So if we're successful, we'll have an interface so that people can actually begin to use the old data with the new architecture in the month of December.
Would you maybe say we'll probably put out some communications about what data will be available where and how it can be accessed, because there may be some changes to some of the older data and how that can be accessed as well, but we'll make sure that's clear for everyone, because as we move, perhaps the IPCC author teams have their first meeting in December, there probably will start to be seeking the data, so we'll try and make sure that's very clear where it is available and how it can be accessed. If we don't have any other questions, James, that's you.
That's me. I guess one additional point I'll just mention, since there's a moment here. With the data request, as I mentioned, it's been developed over a community consultation process over the past 2 years. Our understanding is that groups are picking it up now. Some have already kind of reviewed it and are starting to implement, maybe others have yet to pick it up. So I just want to emphasize this is another area where, of course, it's been prepared very carefully, but as modelers pick it up, if issues are found, please do raise them so that the data request task team and CV's team can address those. Thank you.
Yes, please do use the discussion boards and raise issues as well in the GitHub pages, because that allows different members of the community to come back and respond usually pretty quickly. So we aim to have responses as soon as possible. Last call for any questions, and otherwise I'll let everyone get on with their day and evening. As I've mentioned in the chat, the slides are available for you to download from the website, and we'll upload the recordings of the sessions to YouTube in the next few days and add them to event web pages, and we'll email it out to everyone who registered to attend. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining, and get in touch if you have any questions. Great.